information disorder and women. And some of these intersections are what we're going to be exploring at this presentation, at this panel today. Now, I have researchers and academics here who are going to be making presentations. I want to share my slides so that I can introduce them. Okay, I want to share my screen, sorry. Okay. Now, we're going to, I hope you can see my screen. So we're going to be having a keynote presentation by Mr. Dapo Olorunyomi. I'm very excited to have him on this panel. He's an award-winning reporter and editor with varied experience in Nigeria and internationally as well. He was the recipient of the International Editor of the Year Award and has won the Freedom to Write Prize and the Press Freedom Award from the PEN and the National Association of Black Journalists. Mr. Olorunyomi moved to the United States during the military era of General Sani Abacha, where he worked first as the Senior Fellow Africa at the Washington, D.C. offices of the Panellists Institute, and later as the Nigeria Project Director for Freedom House. He returned to Nigeria in 2005 to work for the EFCC. He's an editorial expert with Dubawa, a fact-checking and news verification organization in Nigeria. Dubawa is a project of the Center for Investigative Journalism in Nigeria, and it is recognized by the International Fact-Checking Network, IFCN. Wow, is John able to help me take care of that feedback, please? Okay, and we're also going to be listening to Chikezie E, Dr. Chikezie Uzuegbunam. He holds a doctorate degree in Media Studies from the Center for Film and Media Studies at the University of Cape Town. Previously, he obtained his master's in mass communication from the Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Nigeria. He has taught and researched in both Nigeria and South Africa for almost a decade. He's a postdoctoral research fellow at the Institute for Humanities in Africa, University of Cape Town. And since 2013, he has published extensively in the areas of digital media, young people's digital cultures, popular culture, misinformation, and political and health communication. He has recently spent time as a visiting researcher in the Center for Media and Journalism Studies at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. Previously, he was the 2019 fellow of the Oxford Media Policy Institute at Oxford University in the United Kingdom. And we're also going to be listening to Dr. Raheemat, who is a PhD. She's a doctor, a media researcher, and an academic. She's also a 2020 research fellow with Dubawa, and she has published extensively on media studies, journalism studies, health communication, and information disorder. She lectures journalism at Lagos State University School of Communication. And okay, our next panelist is Mr. Jamiu Folarin. Mr. Folarin is a lecturer and researcher at the Department of Mass Communication at Crescent University, Abeokuta in Nigeria. He's a PhD candidate at Olabisi Onabanjo University at Agogo, Yogo State. And his the thesis that he's working on is focused on comparative analysis of the adoption of digital tools in fact-checking information in the 2019 elections in Nigeria. Now, prior to that, he practiced journalism in a radio station in Ogun State, and is also a pioneer staff of the News and Current Affairs Department. He was also a 2020 Dubai Research Fellow with PTCIJ and is currently a 2021 fellow of Solution Journalism Network. Second to the last panelist is Dr. Omowunmi Olaseinde, who is a lecturer in the Department of Mass Communication at Chivas University, Owo, in Ondo State, Nigeria. She specializes in broadcasting, communication, and gender studies. She has a bachelor's degree in mass communication from Adekunle Ajasin University in Ogun State. Her master's degree is also and her PhD are both from the University of Lagos, in mass communication from Babcock University, Ogun State in Nigeria, sorry. And she started lecturing at Moshid Abiola Polytechnic in Ogun State in 2010 before she joined Achievers University in 2019, where she's currently the coordinator of the communication department. And finally, we have Dr. Chinwe Comfort Chinuanu-Akpuh, who specializes in public relations, advertising, and administration. She teaches part-time at Babcock University's Mass Comm department, while her main role is as a researcher at Babcock University's White SDA Research Center. She conducts research studies and organizes workshops and trainings at the center. And her bachelor's degree, master's, and doctorate degrees are all in mass communication. And finally, I'm your host. My name is Ganiyat Tijani-Adenle. I have a PhD degree in Media, Gender, and Communication Studies from the Montfort University, Leicester, United Kingdom. A bachelor's and master's degree in mass communication from the University of Lagos. I've worked as a journalist at West of Nigeria before joining Lagos State University as an academic, and I'm currently a 2021 postdoctoral fellow with UBAWA. So we're going to go straight to Mr. Dapo Olorunyomi, and he's going to be giving us his presentation he's going to be giving us a keynote address on undermining women's worth through disinformation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adenle, and what a great pleasure, certainly an honor to be here. I also like to congratulate you for this exceedingly exciting panel. Just permit me to say one sentence also about the AWIM, which I think really deserves our accolade, and year in, year out, how they've taken this whole battle and women and media creating their spaces. Thank you so very much for this. It's a very short, a very brief remarks would like to make here. One is to make the point that we are at a particular period in the history of the world where I think democracy is in such great trouble. There's always a temptation when we're doing mass communication, journalism, discussion to always lose sight of the fact that fundamentally all about the media is its central role in the project of democracy. That's little points, which is why I think this panel itself is such an important one today, is because if you look at the trouble that democracy is going through, its inability to deliver the public good, which is also the great promise of journalism, indeed, it's yielding ground to traditions of totalitarianism that is growing even in the advanced democratic centers of the world, United States, India, Brazil, and so on and so forth. That brings us to the core of, I think the topic that Dr. Adenle had assembled us to discuss, that if you look at the trouble that democracy is going through today, one of the key elements is indeed the whole question of disinformation. If democracy is going to work, if it's going to be able to yield the promises of development, the expansions of liberty and the rights of people, it is very important for us to also always constantly interrogate those things that fetter its development. Those who work in this area of information disorder generally say that when we come to the realm of disinformation, this is where the intent of actors have to stymie, try to create obstacles in the whole effort of the whole communication practice. I think why this is exciting for us is also because one of the areas that we have really never looked at in any serious sense is, the gendered perspective of disinformation. How women, numerically, perhaps the largest sections of our community, have become themselves targets of this kind of disinformation. And that's why, I think this is not only important today, but it's also helped us to go back even to the kinds of work that we have been doing historically. So DUBAWA, the organization which I work with, about 2-3 years ago, we started this whole project of trying to explore how this information has become a major problem also in the making of our own democracy in Nigeria. Eventually, this year, we decided to expand our bandwidth to the 5 English-speaking countries in West Africa. And the idea, of course, is to see whether we can help contribute to the important conversation and discussion around making the ECOWAS region a zone of empowerment, a zone of accountability, and where democratic values can truly endure. I think what I can merely add at this point is to say that the little time that we've gone through, the greatest strength that we've achieved is the contributions that our fellows have made. And of this, I think I want just to say in particular that we're so extraordinarily lucky that three of our fellows are really participating, the panel today, Dr. Ganiyat Tijani-Adenle and Dr. Adenle, and we're extraordinarily grateful for this. I want to conclude this little discussion by saying, if we're going to be able to address the problems of disinformation, especially in its gendered form, it is important that we link it to the general problems of democracy, that, which is a broader context. We have traditionally addressed this using tools like fact-checking, media literacy, and indeed how we can also improve on, reforms within regulatory corridors. And this is really something that I hope that scholars here will help us explore further and see how it then ultimately relates to the worth and value of women. Without doubt, the power of women to move forward will have to be erected in how we're able to deconstruct the whole menace of disinformation that has kept women, that has abused women, and that had always tried to undermine their place both in the political process, in the economic process, and in the social arena. Thank you so very much for this opportunity, Dr. Adeniran, and I'm extremely grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Olorunyomi. My key takeaway from your address is the fact that while we're, analyzing the intersections between gender or feminism and information disorder, we have to relate this to democracy if we want to actually be able to achieve results. Mr. Olorunyomi will be leaving us very soon, so if you have any comments or questions, now is the time to bring it up before we proceed to take the academic papers from the remaining members of the panel. I don't think we have any questions at the moment. So we're just going to say a very big thank you to Mr. Olorunyomi for his presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Now we're going to be starting the panel discussion with Dr. Raheemat Adeniran of Lagos State University School of Communication, and she's going to be discussing the gendering misinformation and analysis of gender differentials in an online survey on the viral Stella Emmanuel COVID-19 video among Nigerians.
Hello, good day, everyone. Am I on now?
Yes, you are on, but if it would be possible, please reduce your screen. Do not make it full screen because it's affecting our activities on our screens. Thank you.
I'm not sure I'll be able to do the slideshow. Will I be able to do the slideshow with it?
Dr. Adeniran, you can continue. I think our presentation isn't really about your screen. It's about what you said. Thank you. Dr. Adeniran, you can go ahead.
I should leave it as it is.
No. You can make it you can use the slideshow.
Is it okay like this?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
All right then. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you may be. My name is Raheemat Adeniran, and my presentation this morning would be looking at gender differentials in an online survey regarding a COVID-19 disinformation video, which we tagged the Stella Emmanuel COVID-19 video. We all know that the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic was accompanied with an avalanche of information disorder, with people making all sorts of claims here and there. This disinformation was a cause of concern globally, necessitating the WHO to target an infodemic, which is defined as an avalanche of information in the public space in which people are unable to decipher which is true and what is not. So we have a number of conspiracy theories that accompanied the COVID-19 pandemic since its emergence in 2019. And among the leading waves of artists around the pandemic were those relating to the origin of the pandemic, the transmission, the cures, the prevention, and government responses to the pandemic. There are an array of artists that has been promoted regarding the pandemic, and these are just the leading ones. For the focus of this presentation, we'll be looking at a specific video that went viral sometimes in July 2020. It is what to tag the Stella Emmanuel video. I'm not sure if many of us can recognize this from the accompanying image here. From the accompanying image here. The video was released sometimes in July 27, 2020, and actually gained virality after the video was retweeted by the then United States President Donald Trump. This particular video gained virality in Nigeria in July 28, 2020, and different versions of this video was shared among people within the country and beyond. And various versions of the video was in circulation, and majority of this video had gained tens of millions of downloads. Social media giants were appear to be up to the task, and they actually took down the video within hours of its release. But unfortunately, despite this video had already gained virality. And for instance, there was a version of the video that was tagged on Facebook alone, which had been viewed 16 million times. And Facebook actually took down this video within hours of its upload. Another version was noted to have been shared about 14 million times alone. For the purpose of this study, we are focused there just to look at, is there any possibility of gender variations in how public respond to and perceive, how the public respond to this information in the public space. So specifically, we will be looking at how gender differences we'll be looking at the possibility of gender differences in how people believed in the specific video under review. We'll also look at gender differences in how people shared this particular video, and the possibility of the extent to which people believe in the fact-checking on the claims, the fact-checking of the video, which obviously debunked the claims made in the video. Our method was the Google online survey using the Google Forms, and the link for the questionnaire content was entered into the Google Forms. The link to this questionnaire was shared across WhatsApp groups, varied WhatsApp groups, and individual numbers. And we appeal to members for personal contact and friends and colleagues to also help share this link among their contacts for more people, for more respondents to share, for more respondents to respond to the questionnaire. Our justification for using this approach was that it was actually impossible for us to get a clear list or a clear population frame to actually use to conduct the study. So we relied on purposive sampling using the willingness of respondents to actually fill the questionnaire. So whoever comes across the questionnaire, and if you are willing to fill it, we encourage you to fill it. And at the end of the day, the study period spanned 2 weeks, ranging from August 8 to August 22. And in total, we had 222 respondents who filled the questionnaire from across the country and beyond, with the southwest region of the country gaining dominance among the respondents. Respondents were mostly male, and they were mostly aged 30 to 44 years of age. Among our key findings was that a large proportion of respondents confirmed seeing the video across multiple platforms. So this suggests that the video was actually available on various platforms in the country. But WhatsApp was the largest platform, single platform, through which respondents reported that they actually saw the video. And less than 20%, contrary to expectation that people readily share information that they received, for this particular study, only 20% of the respondents confirmed sharing the video. And 23% of the male respondents said they shared the video, compared to just 14% of females. On the average, more males appear to have believed in the content of the claims made in the video compared to the women. Following the release of the video, a number of individuals actually posted countering claims, trying to debunk the things trying to debunk the claims made in the video. For this particular countering social media post, 71% of males and 60% of females said they actually saw one of these countering social media posts online. And on the average, more men and females said their opinions swayed after they had read the countering social media post. Then more males than females, so about half of males and just 34% of females said they were aware of fact-checking of the claims. as expected, fact checkers actually, within a day or two, most fact checkers in the country and beyond published fact checks debunking the claims made in the video. And for this fact checking, only more males actually saw the fact checking than females. And more males also read the fact check. Among the 42% of males and 26% of females said they had read the fact check. And 22% of males and 12% of females said they actually shared the fact check. So among people that actually read or shared the fact check, among the people that actually read the fact check, only 22% of the males and 12% of females said they did share the fact check. And on the average, compared to other variables measured, more females appear to have believed in the verdict made by the fact-checking organization. So more females actually believed what the verdict of the fact checks debunking these claims compared to males. So we had more females agreeing with the verdicts of the fact checks than the female respondents. Now on the general note, we also asked respondents about the likelihood to which they would actually practice some of these behaviors that were promoted in the video. So we asked them if they were willing to use the hydroxychloroquine in combination with other drugs as promoted in the video, in case for them to preventing themselves from testing positive to COVID-19. More males than females said they would likely use hydroxychloroquine to prevent COVID-19 to prevent themselves from being infected with COVID-19. Also on self-medicating in the case of in the case that they suspect that they might have COVID-19 pandemic. More males said they would likely use hydroxychloroquine to treat as a self-medication to treat COVID-19 should they suspect that they might have COVID-19 pandemic. So on the general note, our findings here suggest that perhaps more men may be likely to engage with and believe COVID-19 misinformation than women. Our findings also suggest that perhaps women tend to believe claims when they are provided with clear justification on whatever verdict on the claims being made, which might suggest why more women actually believed the verdict in the fact-checking done on the video compared to the men. For the male respondents, we also found that male respondents were more likely to act on false claims promoted in misinformation video, suggesting that women might actually be more critical in accepting promoted false claims in disinformation content. As a point of note, we want to know that this is just a very, very small study. It is limited in scope and it just focuses on one COVID-19 disinformation video among the array of COVID-19 video that we might have. So it will be interesting for us to have more studies covering more disinformation content regarding the pandemic and how people would actually react and respond to such content. Further studies will be encouraged. Further studies will be encouraged. We should actually try and see how people react and engage with COVID-19 disinformation content online. So I believe that this study here just provide a kind of insight on what people can do what we can do in actually looking at how and examine how the possibility of gender influencing how people perceive and how they respond to COVID-19 disinformation or other disinformation content in the public space. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adeniran. That's very revealing, and I guess I'm eager to listen to Mr. Jamiu Folarin's paper on conceptualizing the culture of gossip, rumor, and information sharing pattern among African women, because the general perception, the assumed perception is that more women would believe disinformation or misinformation compared to men, and I'm excited about the findings that you've come up with. And I hope that while we recommend that other people should do studies, that you could also as well, do more studies so that we can use them to support the findings from this particular one. We'll be taking questions at the end of all the presentations. So I'll be going to Mr. Jamiu Folarin now for his presentation on conceptualizing the culture of gossip, rumor, and information sharing pattern among African women.
Thank you, Dr. Ganiyat Tijani-Adenle, to commend the organizers of this event for putting to the front burner the issue of women and information disorder. My paper specifically will be looking at conceptualizing the concept of gossip, rumor, and information sharing pattern among African men and women. And when we look at it generally, let me try to share my screen, whether I will be allowed to do that now. I'm trying to connect with my laptop, maybe using with the network. Let me try to share my screen. Just a moment. Okay, let me continue as I work on sharing the screen. So,
let me help you with the screen sharing.
All right, thank you. So, the paper I just presented by Dr. Laima concluded that men we share misinformation than women, and this has been one of the things that we've been advocating at the level of the academics, that we should base our arguments more on that we should base our arguments more on the issue of empirical review data that we can work on rather than just working only on guesses. And though there are limitations concerning what was presented by Dr. Laima in terms of generalizing it, but at least we have an empirical data to speak to the concepts of sharing of misinformation or disinformation, as the case may be. It is on this basis that my study is basically is a conceptual paper looking at the concept of gossip, rumor, and information sharing pattern among African men and women. So, so when we look at, let's start with the conceptual clarification. When we talk about gossip, it's just the casual and constrained conversation or reports about other people, typically involving details that are not confirmed as being true. So let's understand and take note of that word, unconfirmed, and things that are not confirmed, things that are not true. Gossip typically related to this. Also, when we talk about rumor, we are talking about something that is currently circulating, story or report of or certain or doubtful truths. So you can see the connection between the two. The first one is the casual, it's just when you make casual, gossip is casual, unconstrained conversation. But the other one is when you circulate reports that are uncertain or doubtful truths. And when we talk about women in this paper, we are looking basically at reference to gender of men and women. So that's what we are referring to when we talk about women. Also, information disorder is the sharing or developing false information with or without the intent of harming, and they are categorized in misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. Misinformation is basically when you don't have intention to harm. Maybe when you have something on social media or you have someone passing information about COVID-19, just like Dr. Raheemat mentioned, and you share it because you share similar thoughts, or you are sentimental, or you have one or two biases So that's misinformation without having the intention of harm. But disinformation is deliberately sharing information to harm or to deceive people and to cause harm. That's disinformation. Among other typology, all these fall, we talk about propaganda, we talk about malinformation, all these typology fall under what we refer to as information disorder. And in our context, when we are discussing this paper, we'll be talking about African communication, and that's we also call it traditional communication or indigenous communication, which is the means of communication in Africa as they are transmitted from one generation to the other. Next slide. So having looked at the conceptual clarification, the issue of communication generally is as old, is older than many abstract and physical objects, including human being, and communication is the nucleus upon which every living and non-living things relies on to exist. And we have this consensus among the two major religions, both Christianity and Islam, and those two religions are the major religion in the world, that communication is the foundation on which other creation were built. And I make reference to scriptural evidence providing and giving us the evidence that communication is key. And when we look at the issue of technology, we talk about advancement in technology, and before this, we must also make reference to African tradition, and because it play a significant role in our life, and because in order to facilitate effective communication, African society developed its unique technology to survive, to socialize, to integrate, to educate, and to develop within its limit and scope. And many scholars have argued that before the emergence of modern communication, printing press, issue of even digital era, we have our own, Africa has its own unique way of communication. And the technology involved in the African communication system include the drum, the trumpet, the gong, the fire, interpersonal communication. And as at the time of their introduction, they are new technology developed to perform the function of the media. And Africa, however, now inherited from the colonial masters to further enhance the socialization process, because the media and the communication process serve as the agent of socialization. And this technology include the printing press, which facilitated the emergence of newspaper, now radio, television, cinema, among others. So what we are saying here is that before the emergence of the printing press, Africa has its own means of communication. Next slide, please. So when we now look at the emergence of computer and the internet technologies, also gave back to new technology, because we have Web 2.0 now, and the new technology is defining all elements in the communication process. And we have the digital era, we have social media, we have among others. But the African communication system has its own peculiar ways of doing things, and we talk about in the agrarian age, the technology used in communication process was indigenous, native, but new. I have highlighted that earlier, that we have African has its own communication system, and there are different names given to this nomenclature. It's called indigenous, among others, because when we look at scholars, they've given and identified specific ways in which Africa communicates. Next slide, please. So we now have the internet, the computer, and social media, that other associated innovation in the 21st century, to take the nomenclature of the new media. We've mentioned earlier that what we had earlier are new media. So what is the research statement of the problem? Why are we looking at the concept of gossip, the concept of rumor, and the information sharing pattern among African women? The issue of fake news is a new lexicon. And before the emergence of fake news, there have been other related terms such as propaganda, disinformation, misinformation, malinformation. All these are referred to as information disorder. Now, when we talk about advancement, just like I mentioned earlier, there have been argument about whether social media should be regulated or not, based on what is happening on the digital public sphere, like social media, like the mainstream media. So we have issue of regulation, non-regulation. So in an attempt to now understand this through research and policy formulation, that in order for us to address the challenges of information disorder, there's need for policymakers or stakeholders to take decision based on knowledge, not based on ignorance or emotion. So that's why there has been an argument that there should be research and policy formulation should be backed with research. And we now have, when we talk about information disorder, it's a Is it a new phenomenon? That's one of the questions we have. No, it is just like old wine in new bottle. That information disorder has been on for long, even before the emergence of printing press. So that's why we are now looking at the African perspective to the issue of information disorder. So information disorder is not peculiar to modern media, and I've highlighted that. Also, information disorder, we must now look at what is now the intersection of information disorder and African communication system. Since we've established and noted that there's no information disorder did not start with social media. So the question we now start asking from this conceptual view that serve as a research problem that other researchers should look at and provide empirical evidence to support or state otherwise is that should the dynamics of African communication system be considered in interrogating fake news and how to it? Because all our interrogation has been focused on social media in order to stop fake news or eradicate it. So as we consider African communication system, now, the other one is it possible to conceptualize the concept of rumor and gossip within the theoretical underpinning of information disorder? We've been developing models, we've been talking about theories relating to information disorder. Can we look at this within the concepts of rumor and gossip, which is not on social media, which is we cannot even associate with mainstream media. So we can associate it more with interpersonal communication. Another question we ask that enable us to bring conceptual review to this, empirical evidence to this is it possible to situate the information sharing pattern of African women?
Hello?
Information disorder milieu.
I saw what you have said.
The focus of our discussion. Like how possible is it for us to look at the issue of rumor, information disorder within the information disorder milieu? We've not been talking about it. Our discussion and our research stakeholders have been focusing on issue on social media, on mainstream media. Can we also look at this? This conceptual paper, therefore, we fill the identified gaps within the scope of information sharing pattern among African men and women. Next slide. So now, the question we now need to answer is that, is it correct that African women are the repository and vessel of gossip and rumor mongering? There has been this stereotype that women spread gossip and rumor than men. There are also arguments that say, no, it is men that are they produce rumor and gossip for others to share. So we need to provide empirical evidence to ascertain the veracity of this claim or this assertion. So another question is that will the statement qualify as a stereotype if it is considered as an opinion? Then the cliche is common in many African communities, and there's need to conceptualize this statement in order to provide the basis for it to be hypothesized and subjected to rigorous research process that will confirm or debunk this age-long stereotype. So if it is made as a statement of fact, will research be able to provide the empirical data to situate it along other variables? Because we'll be talking about malinformation, misinformation. How can we also situate issue of rumor, issue of gossip within and the information sharing pattern among men or women within this variable? Next slide, please. So, are there differences in the information sharing pattern between men and women? I've mentioned this. Is gossip and rumor peculiar to women folks? Of what impact do these have on information flow in Africa? And is there intersection between information sharing pattern among women and men and women information disorder? Do men share fake news more than their female counterparts? We've had the empirical evidence by Dr. Raheemat about male sharing more of false information than male when it comes to COVID-19 vaccine. So we need to also look at this. Also, what roles do biases and sentiment play in this phenomenon? So we talk about biases. What we must also interrogate this: are these culturally sanctioned? Issue of rumor and culture, and gossip, is it culturally sanctioned? It is on this basis that there's need also now to conceptualize and interrogate the culture of gossip, rumor, and information sharing disorder. There's need for us to provide empirical data to do this. All the scope of this study is a conceptual paper, and just like I mentioned earlier, and we are situating gossip and rumor in Africa within the context of information disorder. We are interrogating the age-long assumption that women are the vessel to the spread of rumor, and we are conceptualizing the concept among African men and women. So next slide. So from the methodology, just like we are working on this, it's a conceptual paper, and this explores documentary evidence to put the issue in better perspective as a way of properly putting in context the problem of mis and disinformation in Africa and best approach to tackle it. Next slide, please. So the theoretical framework that we use to explain this phenomenon are many. We have women theories that we are going to look at, and look at the intersection between these theories and the issue of gossip, rumor, and information sharing pattern. Issue of propaganda matters a lot when we talk about even the issue of disinformation. That you intentionally spread misinformation information in order to harm. Two-step flow of information. What is the role of opinion leader when it comes to sharing information in Africa? Those African leaders, for example, your mother, or your father, or your members of the community, leaders in the community, in what way do they contribute to the spread of rumor and rumor in the community? We talk about gossip and rumor in the community. The step, do we get this information from the mainstream media, or we get them from an opinion leader? Who are the repository, who manufacture and produce this information? This theory will enable us to look at the intersection. We talk about elusive backfire effect. It's a new theory that talks about when you present fact check, for example, it will enable people to even believe more in that false information. Although there have been back and forth in terms of empirical evidence to ascertain, to support or deny this particular theory. So we will also look at this. And just like I mentioned earlier, women theory relating to this will also be interrogated. And in conclusion, the significance of this study, before talking about my conclusion, because about issue of rumor, issue of gossip, and the information sharing pattern among African men and women, we must look at the significance to what we are discussing presently, especially when it comes to information disorder. So this is this study and this conceptual paper is expected to enable researchers understand the difference in the production and consumption of false information as a way of providing reliable data for all stakeholders in the information ecosystem. Because the argument and the advocacy has been that whatever policy stakeholders want to make in relation to regulation of social media or regulation of information or information flow order, we must look at, it must be based on knowledge, not based on sentiment. Also, it will also enable stakeholders to interrogate and understand the production and distribution of information disorder outside the mainstream and social media. And that's exactly one of the thrusts of this paper, that we should not only focus on the mainstream media and social media, we should also look at other forms of communication, interpersonal communication, and the relevance and the relationship to issue of information disorder. And also the significance of this study is that it will hypothesize for further interrogation and research the assumption that the production and spread of gossip and rumor is gender-driven. And that's the significance of this study. And in conclusion, from all this explanation and looking at the concept of gossip, rumor, and information sharing pattern among African women, it has been conceptualized. And this paper concludes that information disorder is not limited to mainstream and social media, and that stakeholders should interrogate the role of interpersonal communication in information disorder, and not only mainstream media and social media. And that it is high time that researchers provide empirical evidence to trace the production and spread of gossip and rumor, so that we'll be able to situate it within the context of information disorder, and we provide stakeholders with enough empirical evidence to make policy, and not to base their policy on guesses and sentiment, but based on empirical data. So, and lastly, stakeholders must also situate African communication system within the framework of information disorder. So thank you very much for your attention and for giving me the opportunity to present my paper and my thoughts at this conference. So thank you very much.
Wow, that was very enlightening. I must say that I had some notions about what you were going to present, and that you have actually positively surprised me. Thank you very much. I'd like to do my own presentation now. I also have a presentation, but it's actually a work in progress, and I'm going to be talking to my thoughts about the paper. Okay, so my article is about my study is about the economy of information disorder in Nigerian women-owned blogs and online news platforms. And I was motivated to do this study because my PhD thesis was on women in the Nigerian news media, status, experiences, and structures. And I realized, among other things, that while women in Nigeria are increasingly entering the news media, there is still a lot of glass ceilings and challenges that they grapple with. So, and one of the key findings was that the new media is actually providing access for women journalists that are not able to enter the mainstream media, and for women journalists who leave the media on their own or who are frustrated out because of glass ceilings that are preventing their progress to editorial and management positions. If they are now online, establishing their own blogs, online news platforms, or issue-specific news outlets, I want to look at how the economy of media management is affecting their performance in this sector. Now, so like I said, it is actually work in progress, and I'm not going to talk more on information disorder because the previous speaker, Mr. Jamiu Folarin, had actually contextualized, explained the context. So I'm just going to go to information disorder in the Nigerian news media. I'm currently wrapping up a paper on information disorder and the future of mainstream journalism in Nigeria, and results show that mainstream media organizations in Nigeria are increasingly guilty of publishing disinformation. And this is actually a serious issue because people depend on them for factual and accurate reports, because the online news industry is now filled with a lot of people, professionals, non-professionals, parts of people who actually circumvent ethics that they are aware of just because of financial gains that they want to derive. So when we're talking about information disorder in Nigeria, it's really important that we want to find out, do women-owned news media organizations, do they actually fit the stereotype of the regular mainstream news media in Nigeria that are increasingly, falling back on standards and publishing disinformation? Or women-owned media organizations are actually operating above par and actually ensuring that they do not publish disinformation? Now, why am I particular about women-owned news media? The reason is because online platforms have given women journalists access to journalism compared to mainstream media. It has provided an alternative for women who are not able to get in, those who are frustrated out, or those who leave because they're not able to balance, work and family life. And if they are coming online to establish news outlets, if they lose credibility, then they would not be able to compete at par with men, and they will not be recognized, and they would not be able to actually make the difference that they would assume they want to make and the society expect them to make. Now, the one of the key inquiries is there any difference in the way that women-owned news online news platforms approach disinformation compared to the way that regular mainstream news organizations approach, handle the issue of publishing disinformation online? And while I'm still gathering data, I'll say that there are two models. The first model is actually the fact that women-owned news online do not actually operate any differently from men. The political economies are the same. They also want the clicks. They want to rush to publish. They always want to ensure that they do not have a story that's online that is not published. They also have very few people working for them, and a lot of, by the time you call them and say, look, you publish this story and it's false, and they say, oh, sorry, it was somebody that was working with me. And there's actually no difference in majority of women-owned online news outlets. whether it is owned and managed by women who had actually held editorial positions and worked in the mainstream media, or whether it's owned by women who are just starting out on their own, there is no significant difference in their approach to the publishing of this information. The second model is actually those who play safe, in the sense that, well, they're working maybe on their own or with only one extra staff. They don't, they rarely gather news. So what they do is to harvest news that have been published by mainstream news outlets. So most of the time, they play safe because they ensure that, okay, the news has been out, there are no rebuttals, and so by the time they're putting it on their website, there's really any problem. So those are the two models I've encountered, and I've not come across anyone that is adventurous, publishing often and all of that, and yet has not been fact-checked for one thing or the other. Okay, so now there are some realities that are influencing this status quo. There are some factors that are bringing about a situation where women journalists, especially those who held editorial positions in mainstream news organizations and who are professionally and academically trained and who know the implication of publishing disorder, there are reasons why they begin to publish this information when they start, when they have their own online news outlets. One of the reasons is actually the fact that they need advertisers are online and they go to where the clicks, the media audiences are. And so because of the need to generate a lot of clicks and show frequency of web visits, a lot of media organizations, they do misleading headlines, they publish a lot of different forms of disinformation, even though they are professionally aware that they are wrong, because they want to also break even and get as much advertising as that can help them to survive. Another thing I've also discovered is that most of the time they work alone or with only one or two persons who are either young and who are employed because they are tech savvy and not necessarily because they have media education and training, or they work with people who are supposed to have media education and training, but who are not grounded on the social responsibilities of the media, and they do not really reflect on the implications of publishing this information. Another reason why I feel that basically I believe that is the political economy realities of surviving that are actually influencing the publication of this information on women-owned news outlets. They want to break even. They also want to be out there. They want to publish often. They want to post news alerts frequently, and they don't have the manpower and the resources to go through the fact-checking process. And these are just the main reasons why they do not do journalism differently, and they end up publishing this information like other online news outlets or some mainstream news organizations. Now, I feel that this situation is like this because a lot of the women-owned news outlets do not explore the opportunities. And the opportunities, I believe, are actually what some news organizations that rarely get fact-checked, what they do. Number one is that they do not build a model where they want to post news at every second. They actually work more on writing investigative reports and just supplement with news from with reports from agency reports and the news they can get from news agencies. So I feel that focusing on investigative reports can actually set them apart and prevent the need to want to post stories every time without being able to fact check them and do due diligence. I also feel that another opportunity that women-owned news organizations can explore that can prevent them or help them, curb the spread of disinformation is when they look towards writing grants or getting grants, or when they operate like non-for-profit. When they operate like non-for-profit, their source of income will not, be solely dependent on advertising, and they are able to, get grants and funding to actually, do investigative reports and target reporting, and that would lessen the burden of getting clicks so that they can get advertising. I also feel that another opportunity that women-owned news organizations can explore is actually having a specific publishing around themes. This is happening a lot in broadcasting where people have narrowcasting, where there's narrowcasting, and we have women radio, we have Jordan FM, that's the business radio, we have traffic radio, we have education radio. Perhaps when it comes to online news writing, women journalists can begin to explore having issue-specific online platforms so that they would have a niche and they will not be compelled to compete with people who have more resources than they are. And there are several other opportunities as well, but I'll just stop on that. Now, what are the implications of the publication of disinformation by women-owned news outlets on the status of women in the news media? Now, the reality is that at the time I was doing my thesis in 2019, there were like 4 women on that were title editors in the Nigerian news media. And today, a lot of them, I think there's only one of them, while one of them moved to an international news agency, while the remaining 2 are out of the newsroom today, managing their own news organization. So it is like a revolving door. So when you think you have a few women, in some years before you know what's happening, they are out of the system, whether due to politics or personal decisions. And so we're just 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. And new ICTs and new technologies, they give women journalists a vantage position to be able to access the news industry without being solely dependent on being able to deal with the politics of the news media. So if women-owned news organizations do not get it right, then we may actually be losing on the opportunities that ICTs and new media can actually bring for the enhancement of the status and positions of women in the news media. And so, thank you very much. I'll take your comment, and I hope that would assist me in making a better article by the time I'm done with that. So after my presentation, I'll be calling on the duo of Dr. Omowunmi Olaseinde and Dr. Chinwe Chinuanu-Akpuh, who will be making a joint presentation on social media illusion of COVID-19 vaccine and the attitude of women towards vaccination in Southwest Nigeria.
Good morning, Dr. Ganiyat.
Good morning.
Hello. Good morning, Dr. Ganiyat.
Good morning. We can hear you. Please go on, ma'am.
Okay. I am Omowunmi Olaseinde. I and my co-presenter, Dr. Chinuanu-Akpuh, Chinwe, will be presenting on social media illusion of COVID-19 vaccine and attitude of women towards vaccination in Southwest Nigeria. The emergence of COVID-19, the outbreak of COVID-19, coronavirus in late 2019 and 2020 eroded a lot of misinformation and which ultimately led to information disorder among the people among the people globally and even especially in Nigeria. So having the outbreak of the disease eroded what the United Nations tagged infodemic, because the pandemic was so serious and everybody was afraid of what could have been, what could happen, and we were kept indoors for a long time. While we were indoors, there are lots of information and misinformation on coronavirus. But as of then, there was no solution, no remedy, and people hoped for the introduction or invention of vaccines so that we can get out of our lockdown and go back to our new normal way of life. So based on this, early 2021, we have between mid-2020 and late 2020, we heard about invention of COVID-19 vaccines. And there are a lot of information about this because the pandemic eroded a lot of information disorder. And in 2021 in Nigeria, we have the vaccines being introduced in the early 2021 and people being encouraged to go for the vaccine. From observations and from exposure to social media, there have been series of complex and varied social media information disorder on corona vaccines linked to various health problems. And part of the health problems are that there was a man in Ordibo local government, or to be specific, who said the vaccine, he put a bulb on the site of the vaccine and said the vaccine can light up a bulb. Also, there were claims on social media, Facebook, and especially WhatsApp, or into different groups on WhatsApp, that this vaccine, if one takes it, the person that takes, whoever is vaccinated will die between 2 years of being vaccinated. And also, there are also insinuations about the vaccines that the vaccine was developed as a result, as a biological weapon to cause instability in poor countries. Also, it is said about the 5G network, the vaccines to erode the religious, the mark of 666 is that whoever did not take the vaccine will not have access to some things in the social arena of the country. So looking at this, people are scared of taking the vaccine and they are discouraged. People can be said to be discouraged from taking this vaccine, thereby increasing the vulnerability to the disease. And it is on this basis that watching and listening to these messages on social media could be said to bring about hesitancy. Taking the injection, hesitancy to taking the injection by women, thereby making them more vulnerable to be infected by the disease. When you look at it, even women that are taking the injection, they can be said, most women said they have taken the injection not because of what the government is telling them, but because of necessity that they may need to travel out and do some other things that will need them to present the document of this, or the evidence of being vaccinated. And going through this, a lot of people are also vulnerable to this disease, to being infected with COVID-19 coronavirus. And it is on this basis that the researchers looked into the media illusion of COVID-19 and its influence on attitude of women towards being vaccinated in Southwest Nigeria. And the objectives of the study are to look at the level of exposure of women in Southwest Nigeria to social media illusion about COVID-19 vaccine, and to look at how exposure to COVID-19 vaccine on social media influence cognitive position, affective disposition, and cognitive or behavioral intention of women in Southwest Nigeria. So, searching the literature, social media was reviewed, Facebook, WhatsApp, information illusion, social media illusions on COVID-19, attitude, and attitude, we look at the components of attitude, which are the cognitive attitude of women towards social media illusion of COVID-19. We look at it in the way that if their exposure to social media illusions or social media representations, disinformation or that information disorder on COVID-19 influence their cognitive disposition towards being vaccinated. And we also look at the affective component, which is with the feelings they have towards being vaccinated, and the behavioral intention, which is the cognitive attitude of women towards being vaccinated with COVID-19 vaccine. Also, social media illusions on COVID-19 and attitude of women towards being vaccinated were also talked about. These concepts were looked into in the literature review. Then going to the theory, the work is pinned on two theories, which are framing theory and cultivation theory. These are theories that talk about long-term effect of exposure to media content and the effect it has on the audience. And looking the relevance of this theory, the theory establishes that the more people are exposed, the more women are exposed to the illusions on social media about COVID-19 vaccine, the more these have effect on them, and the more they have hesitancy towards being vaccinated. So this is where I will stop now, and my colleague, my co-presenter, Dr. Chinuanu-Akpuh, will talk on the methodology before I move on to the findings. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I am standing on the existing protocol. Continuing with where my colleague stopped, I am bringing in the methodology this research took. Okay, for the research design, the study adopted survey research design. The study adopted survey research design to verify the influence of social media illusion messages about COVID-19 vaccine on Southwest Nigerian women's attitude towards the vaccination. And the population of the study looked at 105 female workers who were purposely selected from private universities, 3 different private universities that were randomly selected from Ogun State, Ondo State, and Osun State in Southwest geopolitical zone of Nigeria. For the sample size of this study, 150 female workers of these 3 universities were studied, and 150 was arrived at following 20% of the staff female workforce of these 3 selected universities. And the universities are Babcock University, that is in Ogun State, Adeleke University in Osun State, and Achievers University that is situated at Ondo State. Now, Babcock University has 417 female workers, both academic and staff. Adeleke University has 200 female workers, and Achievers University, 88 female workers, and 20% of each of them ranged those 84 for Babcock University, 40 for Adeleke University, and 18 for Achievers University. But for better outcome of the results, the researchers took the initiative to round up the number to 150 instead of 142 as given by the 20%. Then for the sampling techniques of the study, the researchers adopted multi-stage sampling techniques following the steps involved in this research. To take the decision of which geopolitical zone to study, the researchers did a balloting process. And at the end of the day, Southwest Nigerian was selected amongst others, Southwest Nigerian geopolitical area. Then this reason for studying university workers is based on the fact that academic environment is loaded with knowledge and is a knowledge-based environment. So it was a purposive decision to study the university environments under Southwest Nigerian geopolitical zone. Then, while the decision had been taken, it was also another battle to look at whether federal university, local government, state government university, or private. The decision was also purposely made by the researchers to study private universities based on the fact that it was discovered that private universities resumed almost immediately after the lockdown traumatic exercise, which many public universities like states and federal universities couldn't do immediately while they were struggling with whether to go online or not online academic studies. These private universities moved on, which is to say that between last year, September, 2020 September, when lockdown exercise was called off, and today, that private universities, most of them have stabilized their workforce to the point of giving genuine data about how many workers are found in each of them. The method of data collection, the research instrument was administered by the researchers, the questionnaire copies, and this was done in the three. Hello, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Were you not hearing me before? Sorry, please.
Yes, I lost. Sorry. The middle. I can hear you now.
Dr. Ganiyat, can you hear me, ma? Hello, Dr. Ganiyat, am I online with you? Hello?
You've been online also.
Please.
You've been online also. Continue.
Thank you. Okay.
Continue.
Okay. So for the researchers administered the questionnaire copies by themselves, which were retrieved few minutes after it was administered. Reason being that this is a kind of study that need not interference of any kind. Therefore, it was practically handled, and completed copies of these instruments were retrieved, sorted, and coded and analyzed using frequency count table and percentage. And that formed the primary data of this research study. Meanwhile, the consulted extant and empirical literature formed the secondary data. I will peg it here and hand over to Dr. Olaseinde to discuss the findings of this study. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chinuanu-Akpuh. So moving on with the study, data gathered revealed that women in Southwest Nigeria were not only exposed to social media illusion on COVID-19 vaccine, but also they are exposed to false information on COVID-19 vaccine through social media presentations. And this is evidence in the percentage of what we see of the outcome of the study. Looking at the influence of social media illusion of COVID-19 vaccines on women in the selected universities, COVID-19, social media illusion on COVID-19 has little or minimal influence on the cognitive disposition of women in Southwest Nigeria. In Southwest Nigeria, it's very, very minute. However, looking at the affective and connotative, the behavioral tendency of women towards being vaccinated, the study showed that social media illusion has a larger percentage on the respondents. By the respondents, 75% of the respondents affirming that it makes them afraid of post-vaccine experience and that they feel they may lose their lives after being vaccinated. The respondents, the women said, when they look at this, when they are having exposed to this social media illusion on COVID-19 vaccine, that they are always afraid of post-COVID-19 vaccine experience. As some people had said that it made them feel somehow and somehow. And to the extent that they are afraid of being vaccinated because they don't want to lose their lives. And they kept citing examples that even some health workers have been vaccinated, and after being vaccinated, they died. So this implies that COVID-19 social media illusion on the COVID-19 vaccine has influence on the affective disposition, affective attitude of women in Southwest Nigeria. Also, on the cognitive, their behavioral tendency towards being vaccinated. The study revealed that it also has a large influence on the cognitive disposition of women in Southwest Nigeria, with majority of them, 74% of the respondents, affirming that these messages on social media makes them believe that being vaccinated can lead to other health problems, which may lead to loss of lives. For some of the women said if they have other ailments before taking the vaccine, that what they are exposed to, what they see, what they watch on social media, what they see on WhatsApp, on Facebook, is making them to be afraid towards being vaccinated, that their behavioral tendency is just to keep away for now from being vaccinated. And based on this, conclusion was drawn based on the findings of the study. And the study hereby concludes that COVID-19 vaccine illusion on social media influence the affective and majorly the affective and cognitive behavioral attitude of women in Southwest Nigeria. So the study concludes that either ways, it does not have a great influence on the cognitive attitude, the information they have, their cognitions towards being vaccinated, but their feelings towards it and their behavioral tendency, they can't go for it. And it showed that social media illusions, misinformation or information disorder on COVID-19 vaccine influence women in Southwest Nigeria. So this is the outcome of our studies, and contributions to help the study more, to make it more better, is welcome. And I and my colleagues, on behalf of my colleague, we want to thank the organizer of this conference, Dr. Ganiyat, and other people for giving us the opportunity to make this presentation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Omowunmi Olaseinde and Dr. Chinwe Comfort Chinuanu-Akpuh. I really appreciate your presentation, but I'll quickly move on to Dr. Chikezie Uzuegbunam for his presentation. Dr. Uzuegbunam will be talking on rethinking the image of the African woman in the media in an era of misinformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ganiyat. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be part of this panel speaking on information disorder and women in Africa, or women in media. And I've really enjoyed my colleagues' interventions on this topic, but I'll quickly share my thoughts on what I've titled Rethinking the Image of the African Woman in the Media in a Digital and Misinformation Era. And I will start by noting the fact that when I first received this the invitation to be part of this panel on women and misinformation, or women and information disorder, my first thought was, we are in the digital era, but how has the image and visibility of women changed over the times? Because we know from research evidence and public discourses that women have suffered from misinformation and stereotypes and biases and prejudices, misogyny arising from patriarchy over time. And these have also found their way in media representations of women. And I was thinking, how has this changed over time? So my presentation really is to interrogate that aspect of our thinking. And in thinking about women and information disorder, I guess we have to begin where the root of all this starts from, which is media representations. Of course, women have historically been shown in the media and popular culture in the home, portrayed in these domestic positions in the kitchen, in the bedroom and bathroom, women have been depicted as housewives and mothers, depicted in positions of subservience and dependence, and women's appearance, often becomes the most notable factor in their representation. Also, women have infrequently provided an argument for the sale of a product. In the case of advertising, women are mostly used as props, rather than engaging critically with what is being advertised. And also in film and popular culture, there is the aspect of the male gaze. An analysis of the representation of women in film shows the narrative of woman as an image, woman as image and man as the bearer of the look. The male gaze in narrative film, women hold the look, but they also play to and signifies the male desire. And gender studies also have found that imagery of women in the media is frequently cropped in a way that reduces women to particular body parts. And women's bodies are objectified, and the effect is to deny women's humanity, to present them as not full or whole human beings, but as fetishized or dismembered bits or as objects, according to Geo 2009. And so these are different representations, but they're rooted in misconceptions and biases and prejudices and misogynies that we can really characterize as misinformation, or we can really characterize as malinformation or information disorder. And so the problem, what is the problem? The problem is rooted in patriarchy and the problematic media representations of women over the decades. And historically, like I've said before, women have suffered the brunt of the impact of patriarchy. And part of these impacts include degrees of misconceptions, malinformation and misinformation regarding the male gender, about who a woman is and how she should be in the world. And of course, patriarchy being the social structure that is based on the principle whereby patriarchal societies ensure that the masculine power and authority dominates both social, political, but also economic institutions. And these ensures that women are oppressed in different spheres of society. And also from the range of mainstream media representations of women that we've looked at shortly, we see how this masquerade as stereotypes, as biases and prejudices about who and what a woman should be. And this is 2022. So in thinking about how far we have come, it's still 2021, but the situation is still bad. And although awareness has increased with the digital age and with social media and all of that, misogyny and sexism are increasingly called out, but also we find that these online platforms also help in the perpetuation of the prejudices, as I will further show shortly. For instance, when Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the new leader of the WTO, World Trade Organization, was announced as the first African and the first female to head the global organization. Some foreign publications used racist and sexist language to describe her and her position. Some called her a grandmother from Africa, has assumed the position of the leader of WTO and stuff like that. And this is happening in 2020, 2021. And we ask, when is this going to end? And according to Global Media Monitoring Project's recent report, which I believe some of you have seen, women are underrepresented across all the identity groups, and giving visibility and voice for minority and historically marginalized women remains in jeopardy. And even in COVID-19 reporting, like some of my colleagues have shared, and also some of the thoughts from the keynote earlier this morning, women have less voice and visibility in the overall narrative. And according to the GMMP report, it will take a further 67 years to close this average gender equality gap in traditional news media. And And I know that there have been various forms of feminisms, or feminist movements that have come up over the years to try to fight for the empowerment of women and to defend women's rights. We know that there are four main, according to research literature, there are four main waves or stages of feminist movement. The first stage being the stage where women fought for legal equality, citizenship, and women's right to vote. The second wave being the era where reproductive rights and childcare, domestic work, inequality in relationships and marriage, workplace inequality were the focus. But of course, this era focused on white women, white middle-class women. But also there was a third wave where campaigns against workplace sexual harassment and the issue of intersectionality and post-feminist reclamation of sexual subjectivity and also trans rights were the focus. I think we're in the fourth wave, which is characterized by the online campaigns about women, and we see the Me Too movement being part of that, the queer movement, the sex positive, trans inclusive, body positive, and digitally driven, movements about women and, women's images and visibility in the world. And like I said, the consequences have been huge because of this historical marginalization or historical forms of information disorder about the female gender. History, I believe, has not been fair to women, and more so women in the global South context. I believe that there's a lack of enough stories about women, and particularly those living in the margins in Africa, in sub-Saharan African countries. Women's stories are not believed enough. I wish women's stories would be believed enough. Stories on gender-based violence, sexism in the workplace, marginalization, and so on and so forth. And there is a continuing disproportionate number of women in professional spaces and disciplines. And in talking about history and how it has not been fair to women, only 0.5% of history has women history as part of it. And that is, a huge problem. And so the question is, has the image of women in the social media era changed? The answer is yes and no, because we live in the fake news or misinformation or disinformation era where the digital or online platforms of the internet and social media continue to perpetuate the historical or mainstream ideologies and perspectives about women, prejudices about women. But indeed, social media has without doubt democratized the public sphere, leading to multiple opinions being spread and being heard, right? But it has also increased access and the opportunity to share negative and misogynistic views of women. Digital media's multimedia features, comprising audio, video, text, images on social media, for example, allow for increasing discourses on women, but it also opens doors for continued objectification by men, but also by women themselves. And this all leads to increased information disorder about women. And in thinking about this talk, I asked a number of African female professionals in my network to share how they would personally access the ways in which women's image and visibility have changed or remained the same in this digital age of the internet and social media. And the perspectives from their responses point to a number of issues. And I'll quickly share a few excerpts from their responses. The image of women in the digital age has largely remained the same. Digital media somewhat amplifies the prejudices. For example, when advertising a product online, even if it is not related to a woman in any way, women still get to be used as props or as subjects in the advertisements. Even emojis are created in a way to support current stereotypes. It's easy to find emojis, for example, about men who are builders, racers, or men involved in some sort of intense work, but you can't find the same roles for women, meaning that there's still a gap, if even in so-called digital platforms. And there's an interesting perspective from one of the women, where she says that patriarchy or misogyny on the internet is the result of the people that invent the internet or create the apps, the platforms that we use. And these happen to be Caucasian or white males. Their positionality determines nearly which data set goes into training for software creation or setting up algorithms for facial recognition, and ultimately which such results appears on your device. For example, she gave an example of every time you Google beautiful woman, for example, all results that she gets, for example, are pictures of white, cisgender, skinny women. But when you Google ugly woman, it gives you pictures of fat, transgender, lesbian, or some black women. And ultimately, all of these fronted displays are a result of the engineers or the back end creators of these technologies using particular data and machine learning to decide what information is shown to people. And this forms a huge part of the misconception or prejudice or misinformation on the internet. Thanks to media convergence and social media, women's image and visibility has changed, both positively and negatively, but there is still a lot of online cases of gender-based violence, body shaming, loss of privacy, etc. The digital space has given more women the opportunity to assert themselves. However, some of the so-called online feminists who claim to speak for the larger body of women in addressing the issue of patriarchy have a lot of their own, personal prejudices and stereotypes that they still need to unlearn, but they unwittingly pass these down to people, to especially young audience online, especially women, young women online who may not know better. And in another perspective, the internet is a double-edged sword, like one of them mentioned. Because when we talk about the role of the internet for improving the visibility of women in the digital age, first, yes, the internet enables and constrains women's visibility at the same time as it helps to improve it. And apart from the fact that it has enabled women to express their interests and dissents without the usual constraints and restraints, for example, about issues such as gender-based violence that they're experiencing, or workplace inequity and other forms of marginalization in everyday life. The downside remains that many young women seem to be learning on the internet the wrong notions of what feminism is. And I like what one of the women I interviewed said. She said that feminism is not about men hating or men trashing. Feminism is not about callous or being callous or unfeeling. It is about the social, economic, and cultural equality of all genders. Now, in conclusion, I wanted to pose some questions that can, perhaps we can further chew on. First of all, according to the Global Media Monitoring Project's report that I mentioned earlier, full gender equality in terms of numerical counts is insufficient without improvement in the quality of journalism from a gender perspective. Now, the question is, how do we make this improvement in the African context? Because journalism is a huge part of the solution, I believe. And also, secondly, there's a failure to extend the opportunity for more women citizens to tell their own stories in their own words, to tell the stories which are important to them. And the question is, how do we increase the visibility and multiplicity of African women's stories, and not only that, accurate stories of women's lived realities, both in the media or popular culture or public discourses, because these are needed to really control the information disorder about women. And thirdly, how can we increase the participation of men in Africa who need to play a role in driving the feminist agenda? Because men and women inhabit this world, and if men are not part of the conversation, I wonder how far the feminist agenda could go, especially when we're talking about information disorders and learning or relearning some of the some preconceived or historically problematic ideas about women and the role of women in the world? And how do we begin to remake cultural and social systems that are deeply rooted in patriarchal practices that continue to subjugate rather than empower women? And finally, how can the online media become a more positive, a safer, and more critical space for improving women's visibility and their image, and for dealing with the disorders that women have for a long time suffered? I think I will end it here. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. That's a very insightful presentation. As a feminist scholar myself, a lot of the findings you say resonate with me, and I hope that this would actually generate more thinking, more research, and more introspection about how feminism, women's studies, gender equality actually intersect with information disorder, new media, and how we produce and disseminate information online. Unfortunately, we would not be able to take questions because we were out of time. But I do hope, I want to thank you all for joining this panel. And I also want to thank all the panelists for taking time to share their research with us. I hope that we've been able to motivate you or to nudge you into thinking about the nuances that gender nuances as they relate to information disorder, and about how the world is so intertwined that everything is related to something else. And if we really want a gender equitable world, we actually need to have an information clean world. You can email myself or any of the panelists if you have comments or questions. And we're hoping we would publish a special issue from this panel, and then you can be able to interact more with the presentations and findings. Thank you so much. The African Women in Media Conference continues. Please do feel free to check the website and join other sessions. I'm sure they're going to be as important and as informative as this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ganiyat.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Dr. Ganiyat, thank you so much. But I thought our program was supposed to end by 12:45, and by my time here is 11:56. Can't we just have one or two interactions?
The other programs of the conference, and we're not supposed to hold people from being able to join those conferences. It's also possible that they might be, it's also possible that they might want to use the Zoom platform to host some other programs.
Hello everyone. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Ganiyat.
Yeah, thank you, Joy.
All right, so I just wanted to clarify something. The 12:45 there is the time in CAT.
Yeah.
Okay.
So CAT is an hour ahead of WAT. So which is technically 11:45.
Oh, noted, man, noted.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to be reaching out to all the panelists so that we can finally get to make papers out of our presentation. I'll reach out.